I'll wait to do so. Sorry, I'll wait for the high side. Chris, right? No. Tom, sorry. You give the go-ahead. Whenever you're ready.
All set.
Thanks, Tom. All right, good evening. We'll call the meeting to order. It's just after 6:30. And we've got everyone we expect tonight, as David's out, but we've got a quorum and then some. So first up on the agenda is we've got a couple reserve fund transfers this evening. So we've got the Regional Dispatch Feasibility Study, that ECRECC. It's quite an acronym.
So that's what...
ECREC?
ECREC, yes.
RECC for short.
That is our current service provider for regional dispatch.
Right.
Which we've used for 4 years?
We're actually in the fifth year
Okay.
at this point, yeah. Yeah, we went live just over 4 years ago. Yeah. So just by way of a little bit of background, we've talked about this at length with the Board of Selectmen really over the past year plus. But you know, we have been in the Regional Dispatch Center up in Middleton now since its inception. We were an early adopter. They've been going now for 4+ years, and there have been continued concerns from the Board of Selectmen about the long-term financial sustainability of the program up there. It has been heavily subsidized over the years, both through state 911 grant funding and from the Essex County Sheriff's Department. And the intermunicipal agreement that we're part of, essentially the Sheriff's Department manages the operations, and there are 3 advisory boards that the town has representation on and participates in. There's a financial advisory board, police chief, fire chiefs. And really for the past 2+ years, all of those advisory boards have been meeting jointly to make sure that we're efficient and not going in different directions on the different issues. But last summer, one of the priority goals that the selectmen identified was really understanding kind of long-term what the feasibility of the ECREC would be, and potentially considering some other service options. In February, I think this was shared out with the Finance Committee at the time, or soon thereafter, there was an operational, financial, and management audit conducted by MRI of the ECREC, and outlined, about yay thick, about 500 pages long, outlined a number of deficiencies and areas for improvement, and honed in on some priority areas to focus in on. We have been making some good progress in a number of those different areas. Still a long way to go.
What percentage of the deficiencies are related to like service delivery, of actual emergency response?
So I think there were some initial operational hiccups along the way. Certainly coming in the door, we really were frankly pretty rushed. We were under a time crunch. Grant funding was about to expire if we didn't go live at a certain point, so Wenham and Essex went live probably before we were quite ready, and it was before my time here, but just talking to the chiefs. Sounds like there were some service issues there. I will say generally, in my 3+ years in town, there were a lot more concerns and complaints from the fire and police department about the quality of service that the ECREC was providing. Those have diminished over time. We have asked for and received a fair amount of data from them relative to how they're doing QA/QC, response times, and so forth. That being said, one of the key areas that was identified to be addressed in the audit was staff turnover. And obviously staff turnover translates to that learning curve and training period, where, you know, you've got new folks coming in on a fairly regular basis. They've turned over much of their staff since in the 4+ years that they've started. They had
What's
some
their
pretty high attrition rates, quite honestly.
How many, how large is their staff?
Yeah, it's on the order of 20, in the mid-20s right now for full-time dispatchers. The important thing to remember is that most of that staff capacity and time is spent answering the regional cell calls. So initially, there were 2 rooms, and the municipal dispatch staff was in 1, and the dispatchers who responded to the regional cell calls were in another room. Those rooms were merged almost exactly a year ago at this point. And so much of that staff capacity is spent on all those calls coming in and getting them out to the regional centers from there.
Sure.
So the audit was completed. Then there, over the past several months, there has been some discussion about the possibility of State 911 taking over regional dispatch, and really the sheriff shifting into more of a landlord role of the facility. And that's really come to a head in the past few months. We had meetings the end of June and then the beginning, middle of July with undersecretaries from EOPS and State 911 Executive Director. And their message was that they planned to take over operations come next July 1, and that they were going to work with all the stakeholders on that transition. So the good news is, with that now set in stone, we did receive a letter from the Secretary of EOPS back about 2 weeks ago now, 2 or 3 weeks ago, affirming the fact that that's definitely their plan. And they also will be, while they have subsidized much of the costs historically, starting next fiscal year, they're going to subsidize all of our costs. So right now we pay $82,000 and change off the cherry sheet towards those services. That $82,000 has been a fixed amount. It's based on a $16.26 per capita cost. And so that amount has remained static in the 5 years now that we've been in the program. It will drop off entirely come next year. At least that's everything that they've indicated to us.
Right.
And so that being said, prior to that particular information, we'd already had a fair amount of discussion about wanting to reach out to some other area towns to understand what other options might be, what they might look like. So really the 2 best partners are Hamilton, who we were with for a long time and certainly have a track record there, that they have capacity, they have the facility. Obviously there's the prior relationship there. And then Danvers. And Danvers recently renovated and expanded their police station to accommodate some other area communities who might be interested in regional dispatch. Hamilton and Manchester initially expressed some interest in joining Danvers back in 16-17. They commissioned a similar feasibility study that MRI completed, and ultimately both have decided to keep going it on their own at this point for various reasons. But the feasibility study that we have worked on with MRI at this point builds on the 2017 Denver study and the study that they did in 2014 that looked at the time, Hamilton, Ipswich, and Manchester joining into a regional dispatch program together.
So are the results of those prior studies, it sounds like it'll be, they'll be adding to them. Are they incorporating the results of those findings and measuring changes since, or, I mean, they commissioned those studies and paid for them, so.
Yeah, so we're trying to, use as much as we can from the work that was done. Certainly, there was a lot of data collection, and, we know what their staff is, we know what their budget is, we know what their facilities are, we know what their equipment is. So all those things are known.
Right.
So that's the value of the work that's been done. And in terms of our call volume, it's pretty easy to translate from, Danvers hosting Hamilton or Manchester to Danvers or hosting us.
Is the state 911 a mandate or an option? Or let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
In the future, do you suspect it to be a mandate or a option?
I've asked that question. Right now, they have been, I'll say, trying to incentivize communities to participate, and obviously it's been heavily subsidized to this point. It's going to be even more so. Hard to turn away a service that's free when.
But they're still going to take away your 82 grand anyway out of your cherry sheet, one way or the other. Which way are the rate?
No, not necessarily. No, if we aren't participating, that would not get taken off our cherry sheet.
Okay.
It would not.
I'm sorry, if you are or not. If you are participating, they leave it alone. If you're not participating, they take it.
No, so we pay out the 82, it's basically deducted from our state aid. So next year, if we stay with the Middleton program, then we essentially will have an increase of $82,000 on our cherry sheet from what we're used to historically. If we opt out, actually the same thing will happen on our cherry sheet, but obviously we'd have to fund a line item in the budget for paying either Hamilton or Danvers essentially to provide the service for us.
I'm sorry, I didn't let you finish your answer on the mandate versus option. Sorry.
Right, so State 911, historically, their role in this process has been as an oversight administrative body, and really they are the entity that distributes grant funding. Just this past July 1, they assumed regional dispatch operations for the state police in Framingham, but they are not historically, they don't really have a track record of managing the operational side of regional dispatch. They really are a program that was assembled to try to consolidate the 300 plus PSAPs across the state down to a much smaller number. And initially it was, there were going to be a half dozen in the whole state, and they were going to get everybody together and sweeten the pot as much as they could. Obviously that hasn't happened. They've had some success, a lot of money spent, not a lot of consolidation of services. It's always tough when it comes to public safety in particular. So I quite honestly have asked those state officials in the conversations that we've had whether they down the road think that they may force municipalities to join Middleton or other similar regional dispatch centers. The answer that we've gotten back is certainly not at this point, but I think they don't see that they have the statutory authority to do so. That's kind of reading between the lines, the answer that we've gotten back. That being said, if we were to go through this whole process and decide that either Hamilton or Danvers was something that we wanted to move forward on, I think one of our challenges is going to be they're taking over the Middleton program. They want it to be successful. It wouldn't reflect all that well on what they're trying to do if as soon as they take it over, municipalities are leaving the program. I think part of the reason why they're trying to fully subsidize it, to make sure that it stays together, a solid foundation is built, and then they can recruit other municipalities from there. The one thing I should note is there were originally a lot of towns that were expressed interest. Ultimately, there were 6 towns, cities and towns on the books that joined the program. That included Beverly. Beverly, as you probably know, never actually made that transition. There was a lawsuit, there was a settlement, and that kind of chapter is closed out. Amesbury did elect to opt out, and they will be opting out come next July 1. So we will be down to 4 municipalities. So regardless of what happens with the state taking over the program, the IMA, the way that it's drafted, basically says that the IMA is dissolved as soon as the number of member communities drops below 5. So the notice requirements, because there was a 2-year notice in the IMA, minimum 2-year notice, that's gone. We're essentially looking at writing a brand new IMA over the next 6+ months with State 911 and the other towns that are interested to try to make sure that we have a model that's going to work. And the discussion with the Board of Selectmen has basically been, parallel tracks. If we're going to move forward with the feasibility study, we don't know what the findings of that are going to be. So we're going to do our best to continue to make improvements on the findings from the audit with the ECREC, work on drafting an IMA, see what that looks like. I think a really primary concern, and the reason why the board is still disposed to moving forward with the feasibility study, is the fact that there are kind of 3 legs of the stool. There's the finance piece, there's the governance and operations, service levels, and there's a lot of unknowns on the second, or the last 2. A person around the table when we had the meeting with the state officials, all the managers, all the chiefs said, what was promised and what we like is that we all have a seat at the table, that we have some local control over what happens, and we don't want that to change. And while they said that they heard us, all the formal communications back to us have given no mention of what the governance is going to look like. Obviously, if they're going to be taking on a greater financial commitment, on the flip side, you would expect that they're going to seek to make some efficiencies in terms of how the operations are run. I think one of the key ways to do that is to streamline the number of frequencies that we use. Right now, it's not really being operated like a regional dispatch center. Each town, each police and fire department in each town is on their own frequency. And so that is one of the reasons that was cited in the audit for the level of attrition from the staff, because they have to learn 10 different protocols and monitor multiple frequencies, and that can be challenging. So all of the, coming out of the audit, one of the recommendations was you need to try to consolidate frequencies. And I think there is a general consensus, certainly on the fire side more than the police side, that there should at least be 2 towns on a fire channel. So we would go, presumably next July 1, from 5 frequencies down to 2, 2 fire, and then eventually 2 police.
Guaranteed, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
there'll be an additional cost. If you go that route, there'll be additional cost for us. You gotta buy new radios. Guaranteed, there'll be a radio or 2 that'll be on.
Right, but the interesting part about that is State 911 is the granting agency for not just subsidizing operations, but for all the transition and grant funding. So
they may pay.
quite honestly, they're going to foot the bill.
Gonna make it
for
easy 'cause
They're
they
going to
want it
make,
to.
exactly.
Yeah.
They want it to succeed.
Right.
Right. So I'm not concerned long-term about a surprise capital transition cost that's going to get sprung on us. Yeah.
Getting back to the governance, just so I understand it, two questions. If we, not if we pull, it looks like given that it'll be below 5 communities, it's gonna change. I mean, we're, as of a year from now. So would MRI be making recommendations to us specifically from their findings and conclusions and all the data they have, go with Hamilton or go with Hamilton and Danvers or whatever? That's the first question. The second question, maybe I don't understand the whole structure. If you pull out of that, doesn't governance then return back to the 2 or 3 communities that are buying into this? I mean, doesn't it give local control back to it or not? No?
If we opt out,
Yes.
so, yes, so I'll answer your first question. So if we, what MRI's report is gonna tell us is not, you should go with Danvers or you should go with Hamilton. It's gonna say, if you go with Danvers, these are all the considerations to take into account. This is how much it's gonna cost on a going forward basis. This is how much the transition's gonna cost. This is the infrastructure that needs to get put in place.
So that's all a deliverable in this consultation?
Correct.
In this study?
And it's not, do we go with Danvers and Hamilton and Danvers, or do we go with Danvers and Hamilton, or it's just us going it alone in either Danvers or Hamilton, if that makes sense.
So there's just 2?
There's just 2 options.
Why
That's-
didn't you look at the state? Because you didn't think it was
So-
that mature yet?
So we don't need MRI to tell us what the state's gonna look like. We're gonna be living it.
Okay.
And you know, we meet on a monthly basis. They're a fair amount of work has gone into it and will continue to go into it. And we're going to be at the table working through all those details. I think the unknown is, you know, the first time around it was the sheriff's department, and the towns that really negotiated the IMA. There's a lot of unknowns because we hadn't done it before. We look at the IMA now and recognize a number of areas that are deficient, that are confusing, that we know can be tweaked. The question is what the state's going to say. If they're going to really give us free rein and say, we want you to be comfortable, we want you to do what's right for you, or if they're going to come in with the other perspective and really say, we're fully subsidizing it, we're going to run the program the way we want it. And that's our concern, is that if we don't have any skin in the game, so to speak, financially, they could really write us out of the governance and operations, in which case, if we have concerns about service levels or response times or staffing or the whatever, we don't want to be stuck. We want to understand what our options are, what they look like.
I want to back up a little bit. What's the issue with the way the rec is running, or even at a more local level, that's causing, why is state 911 wanting to get into more operational?
I think it's more the sheriff's department wanting to get out of it.
Oh.
It was a prior sheriff that assembled the rec, that cobbled the whole program together. And I think the new sheriff has come in, recognized that it doesn't necessarily align with the mission of his department as he sees it. And so and quite honestly, had served on the State 911 Commission, and so had connections there. State 911 has now taken over, as I said, the state police barracks in Framingham, so they've got a little bit of a track record. We did ask the question, is this something that's going to become their kind of model going forward?
I thought this was a statewide thing. It's not. It's
Nope,
the state
this is a
police
one-off.
barracks and then this. It's not
Yeah.
some switch in the organization of emergency response.
No, this
Across the state.
is like I said, it's a one-off. This isn't part of a larger comprehensive plan. This is really just, I think, quite honestly, they've invested over $10 million in the facility initially. They've been contributing on the order of $2 to $3 million a year operationally over the past 5 years.
The state
Investments made,
has
how do you-
invested.
How do you stabilize
Yep.
and make sure that it succeeds?
And call it your own.
Yep.
I mean, they want to get into this business because they have the resources to do so. So
They have
if
the-
they wanted to, and they had some friendly sheriff's office, by invitation only, it sounds like, right? I mean, to your point, there aren't really any others.
Yeah.
If it's the state police barracks, I mean, there's no real kind of comparison to Wenham's dispatch needs and those of the.
Yeah,
So
and really,
nothing matters in that respect.
when you look at the amount of money that we're talking about, even like all 5 communities, the cherry sheet revenues, about $500,000. So for them, I think they look at it as an investment well spent. My concern is how much are they gonna dial down on the cost side to try to recover some of that? And it's an unknown. So I think it's really important that we work hard on the IMA and make sure that it's clear and that we, are an active participant in the program going forward. But because that's so in the air, and any transition realistically is a year plus out, even if we don't necessarily love where it ends up with the state, I don't think we'd be talking about a July 1 switch to Danvers or Hamilton. I don't think that's realistic.
So timing-wise, we might have, we embark on this study,
Yep.
right, assuming we fund this at $9,800, which is the ask for the RFT. Seems to make sense. Start off on that path, learn more down the road, whatever the time frame is, several months, I'm sure.
Yep.
And then, because we've already, with Amesbury's departure at some point, is that next July as well? Okay, so the IMA doesn't fail before that time frame. So it's not like we have a new IMA and then a transition to state 911 in July. The two would happen at the same time.
Yes.
Okay.
The way it times out, it's actually perfect.
Right, right.
So yeah, we will, basically, we will be working on a new IMA over the next, call it 4 to 6 months. And at the same time, MRI will be conducting their feasibility study. We come out the other side right in the beginning of the budget, or, kind of middle of the budget cycle.
Right.
And we'll be able to say, okay, here are our 3 options. This is how much they're going to cost. This is what the operationally, the level of participation we would have, and then make a decision for the next fiscal year.
Well, I mean, it's, so, one or two quick questions, and then I think I'm good. Who's at the table now? Is it our chiefs?
Yep.
So there's 3 advisory boards?
It's yeah.
And you're
I'm
on
on
one
the
of
finance
them.
advisory. Yeah,
Okay.
it's the town administrators, town managers, mayor
Got
on
it.
the financial advisory board.
And is
then
the
it's-
Essex County Sheriff there as well for those?
Yeah, he's been the previous sheriff was there sometimes, not all that frequently. This sheriff, attends every meeting, very involved, and committed to trying to make it work and get it right. He's not really, he is looking for State 911 to take it over, but he wants to make sure that everybody's in a good place with it. He was police chief in Lynn. He understands
Yeah.
the issue, certainly.
Right, cool. Well, definitely appreciate your looking to make sure in all your communications with Board of Selectmen and also through RECC, that we continue to have that role in the future governance. Even prior to that, it sounds like the long-term viability was kind of always thrown out there as being potentially in question, and maybe
Yeah.
some of the impetus to this type of study. And does that relate primarily to Beverly's not joining and perhaps it not reaching this kind of critical growth level or planned?
I think certainly.
Participation.
I think that was certainly part of it. I think it was really a combination of factors. Up until the middle of the last fiscal year, the Sheriff's Department was subsidizing over $2 million of the operations a year out of his budget. We got that number down last year to about $400,000. Actually, a little less than $400,000. Some of that was using one-time funds, the settlement from the Beverly lawsuit, some prior year funds that hadn't been applied, but we got it down to a much more manageable level. For this fiscal year, again, the sheriff's subsidy is on the order of $400,000. So in a much better place than it had been historically. So again, if you think about what the state 911 would have to assume in terms of costs, it's, call it $400,000 from the sheriff's office, and then close to $500,000 from the 5 municipalities in terms of cherry sheet revenue. So it's just short of $1 million total in
Okay.
terms of contributions, which is, again, how much are they going to try to make up by reducing staffing, finding some efficiencies. I mean, we certainly have done a lot to get it down to the number that we have. But
Okay.
Just one quick question.
Yeah, of
On the-
course.
On the service agreement, I might have missed it. When is this to be completed by? Did I miss that? Is it on here?
it's not on there. Quite honestly, you'll see that the date of the proposal is June 21st. It's, the selectmen did, because of the timing of the meetings with the state, I wanted to make sure that we really understood where they were coming from. So this was talked about at a meeting in early July, and then it's just been hard to coordinate schedules and everything, so it's been another month or so hanging out there. I'll say generally, the expectation, my conversations with MRI back in July, was that it would be about 4 months start to finish for the project to be
The end of
complete.
the end of the calendar year,
Yeah.
roughly.
Yep. So, again, that would bring us to, would be
Right, as we.
right as we ramp up into the,
Right,
into
right.
the budget season. Yep.
Should we be explicit about that in the agreement, or is the understanding you have, you're comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable with the understanding. I certainly, assuming it gets approved tonight and I can sign it and send it off to them, I will make sure to talk to them tomorrow and really get a firm sense of what they can commit to. But I would be very surprised if, they understand the moving parts. They did the audit on I mean, they really would understand our budget cycle and the fact that we're going to have a decision point coming up.
And just one other, about MRI, this company we know because you've done work with them, we've gotten references from other cities and towns.
Yeah, so MRI is really, in some respects, in this particular subject area, the only horse in town. There's a reason why they were the ones that did the feasibility study for Hamilton in 14 and Danvers in 17, and the audit for the rec in February.
Oh, so they've done those past studies.
They've done all 3 of those
Oh,
studies.
I wasn't aware
So
of that. Oh.
that's the value too.
Oh, yeah,
Just
yeah.
to give you a sense, the Danvers and Hamilton studies were both in the low $20,000 range. So we are getting some value back
Right.
Absolutely.
from the work that's already been done.
Oh, good.
And they have a really good sense of both of those operations and of what we've been going on with the rec. And the rec actually issued 2 RFQs to the universe to try to get vendors to put in, and ultimately, MRI was the only qualified vendor, so.
Who commissioned the MRI audit of the rec? Was that the rec paid for it? Did they?
So, in the IMA, it says that, I believe it says it has to be conducted on an annual basis, that audit. It hadn't been completed.
Yep.
Quite honestly, I pushed for it. It eventually got through, and initially, it wasn't in the budget, so the sheriff's department was going to cover it, but the state 911 came in and subsidized it.
Very nice of them.
They, at the time, were actually contemplating conducting their own audit, and so they said, well, the scope of work is a little different, but we're comfortable enough with what you're planning on doing and the vendor that you've selected, so we'll pay for it, and both have the benefit of having the final product.
It's a good sign. I mean, there's accommodation there.
They have been,
It's not dire.
And I don't mean to
$11
disparage the
later.
state. Really, they have been very supportive of the program, obviously. You know, absent their subsidy, you know, this would be a $200,000+ expense for the town. That's certainly, you know, back when we left Hamilton, I think it was over $150,000 a year. So we saw savings then, and, you know, you extrapolate the year-over-year increases we would have come to expect if we had stayed in that program. We've saved a lot of money over the past 5+ years.
And is that, I wasn't quite gonna go there because it seems early, but is that kind of the ballpark? What, without having, of course, the results of any
I was gonna
MRI
ask
work, I mean, what
same
would we be
question.
up against? I mean, it's not 83, in other words. Like, if we were to likely team up with another community on a.
Not even gonna
Yeah, we can't
throw
go
the
there
dart,
yet.
because
Yeah,
it's,
yeah.
it wouldn't be fair.
Right, absolutely. That's what we have MRI do.
Yeah, I'll say that there was significant projected cost savings for Hamilton if they joined with Danvers back when that study was completed.
When we were with Hamilton.
No, the Danvers Hamilton Manchester study.
Oh, right, right.
So Hamilton was set to save somewhere on the order of $150,000. However, the one of the big questions cost-wise in Hamilton was the fact that that would have meant that they had a dark station, and that's not what they're used to. That's what we're used to, because we've always been in Hamilton or up in Middleton. But that's a concern in communities that haven't had that historically. I think I'm not sure about Manchester, but
Dark station, meaning it's not manned from,
not manned
Midnight to-
24/7. At night, right? So generally, you know, there's a callback blocks at our police station,
Right.
but there isn't necessarily, there are officers that are on shift, but they might not be at the station. They could be out in the fields.
Great,
We ready for a motion?
sounds good.
I move to approve a reserve fund transfer request for $9,800 to cover the costs associated with the professional services agreement with Municipal Resources, Inc., dated June 21st, 2018, to complete a regional dispatch feasibility study.
second.
Any comments or questions?
I think it seems to make sense. The Board of Selectmen has been patient in waiting for us to get together to do this. It seems to be the right next step. So none from me.
How is this going into? Reserve fund
Yeah, that would be a good question. Finance director would be able to answer that question.
Excellent.
Do we have a rec studies line item?
No, it would be a capital line item, that it would be the regional dispatch study project account. I don't know,
An account within
it would be a
general
new,
capital.
yeah, well, no, it's a special project account that the town accountant would set up.
Okay,
It's a standalone line item.
so the motion is sufficient as is, right? Great. All right.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye. Great. Very good.
Motion passes.
All right, one RFG down. The next up is for the DPW's trackless machine. And Bill had provided backup information here. This came up a little bit more recently than the rec study, feasibility study. And so breakdown, I think it was in June, right?
July.
July.
Middle of July.
Hey.
Yep.
Sounds like they attempted to repair it. It was a bigger issue. And they use this thing, this is a Swiss Army knife, right? As Bill said, so they use it for sidewalks, they use it for mowing.
Yep. Cold planing,
What is that?
paving.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cold patch, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, it is literally a Swiss Army
do
knife.
all.
Yeah, it is. It's one of the most heavily used pieces of equipment year round. You know, every different season it has a different use. So yeah, 2011 machine, and the turbo unfortunately went poof, and
dieseled, it sounded like.
Yes.
Um,
So, yeah, there's, essentially a $25,000 cost start to finish to replace the engine, brand new engine. It is a Cummins engine with a new 1-year warranty, manufacturer install.
It's a new engine, not a rebuild.
It's a new engine, it's not a rebuild. I think on the agenda it might have said rebuild, just to clarify, it is a new engine.
Does it come with a warranty also, maybe 5 years?
1 year,
Oh, 1 year.
just a 1 year.
What would it cost to replace the whole machine? What is something?
Yeah.
200, Bill said, with attachments.
With all the attachments. But we,
200 plus?
yeah, but the attachments are pretty expensive.
Yeah.
I think the original machine probably closer on the order of 110, 120 without the attachments.
Yeah.
And the idea is, with a new engine, Bill thinks we should be able to get at least another 10 years out of
I was
it.
gonna
It's,
ask that.
it's in good condition. We've got a really excellent mechanic who's been with the town now for a year, who's instituted a really good preventive maintenance program. So I feel confident that absent some, other major failure, exactly, that we'll get another 10 years out of it. So it's some real value for the amount of money it is.
How, what, have we lost out on services in the meantime? I'm sure they're clamoring to get it up and running.
Yeah,
Is there something that residents might notice, or that they're
mowing
first order
in,
business mowing?
in particular, yeah, has been tough. It's really one of our go-tos
Yeah.
for, areas, kind of the islands in between sidewalk and the road and that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's been a month or so. I should say that the town did submit an insurance claim through Maya. Might as well try.
Yeah.
And of course, hadn't heard anything back until earlier this afternoon.
They did get back to you.
Yes.
Oh.
And what they sent back was that they now have a technician who's been assigned to the claim, and they were asking questions about if the damages had been repaired and potentially sending out an appraiser.
Oh.
So in the motion, I just amended the motion, basically
Okay.
saying that it would be, the approval of the RFT would be subject to the denial of the town's insurance claim by our provider. So that way,
Makes sense, yeah.
obviously if they're gonna cover it, great, but I'd rather not, it's just easier while we have everybody around the table to have it queued up in
Right.
case it does get denied, because frankly, that's kind of where I'm guessing it's gonna end up. You never
Yeah.
know with this kind of thing,
You never know, but
but,
in the event that they did cover a portion of it, what would happen
I'm
to
just
the
rewriting
remainder?
it.
Well, so I think we would,
yeah.
good point, but we would still vote on the transfer of 25,000.
It would be, yeah, it would have to
assuming
be,
we need it
it would have
all.
to be 25, because you can't do a,
Oh.
you can't do a not to exceed.
Oh, I
You
was
have
just
to-
doing up to 25,000, subject to the denial of some or all of the town's insurance claim.
Yeah, so an RFT has to be a specific amount.
Oh.
And then it
Okay.
It would-
transfer
it would-
takes place
The
right away.
transfer takes place, and then it would, obviously, if we didn't use it, then it would,
Rectify it later.
then it would drop out to free
To free
cash
cash,
at the end of
yeah.
the year.
Right,
Um,
and then go back to fund the reserve fund again.
Never mind.
Nice try. Good idea otherwise.
Yeah,
Great, so, yeah, who knows, maybe MIA will come back
they
with
might, and we will
something.
certainly
I mean,
do our best.
we don't want to buy a new one.
No.
They need it, and, to your point about the warranty, I was thinking maybe you could buy an extended warranty, but not on a machine that's already got 6-7 years on it. No one's gonna, it doesn't really make sense.
Right.
Right, because something else could go wrong, but Bill's indicated it's in good shape, and as Peter said, they take great care of their stuff, so.
Then we got a
lot
good
of pride.
mechanic.
Yeah, yeah,
Really
We all
important.
need.
yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully the turbo won't eat itself this time around. Those darn turbo diesels. All right, great. Well, I'll make this motion then. I move to approve a reserve fund transfer request in the amount of $25,000 to cover the costs associated with the purchase and installation of a new engine and related materials for the 2011 trackless machine, subject to the denial of the town's insurance claim by our provider, MIA.
Second the motion?
Just will add that that will go to the DPW expense line. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts? None? All right, then we'll go to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, RFTs are all set for now, which brings us to minutes, which are in our packet. I had no changes to these. Did you have any changes to these?
I have a couple minor
Couple minor
changes,
ones,
which I
shall
think
we-
would be fine to just hand
They're not
over.
substantive, we'll just-
No, I don't think so, no.
Okay. Then I'll move, well, after we hear from any other members if we've got changes.
Go through them real quick.
Yep, take your time. GFOA presentation by Jackie on, just a refresher, of course, on the guidelines for the budget documents. And our tree reserve fund transfer for $25,000 for the tree work, planting, inventory management. And of course, we now see a number of signs on trees.
Yes, there was
Hearing coming up as well,
public
right?
hearing
Yeah.
tomorrow night,
Tomorrow
another public hearing on the 6th with the planning board, a lot of discussion.
On the same topic, or no?
Yes, same topic, different category. So there's a public hearing notice requirement for potential tree removals for trees that are located on public property but aren't hazards to the public way. So that would be the tree out here, the birch tree, and a couple trees over at Kingsley Park. And then there's that's just with the tree warden. That's the one that's tomorrow night.
Okay.
And then there's a separate requirement for any tree removals that are on a public way, that are on a scenic road. We have about 8 roads in town, kind of the ones that you'd expect that were designated back in the 70s as scenic roads. So those tree removals are a joint hearing before the tree warden and the planning board. So that's the one on September 6th.
What is considered a scenic?
Yours is scenic, don't worry. Larches, I imagine.
Yeah, larges.
But seriously though, Great.
So there's a statutory designation. The town accepted the statute
From the state.
from the state,
Oh.
and then town meeting approved the designation of certain roads in town, and there's about 8 of them, and that's the ones that you'd suspect. I don't have the list at my disposal. So they were designated back in the 70s, so then anytime that happens, you have to have that hearing. So there's postings in the paper, there's the big orange signs on the trees. We've got a blurb about it on the website, front and center, to try to get the word out about it.
Have residents asked if they can add in other trees, having seen those signs?
I don't know that. The list is pretty extensive. It's over 50 trees.
Yeah.
That was the idea,
Yeah.
the Bartlett study, their recommendation was,
Isn't it like 300 trees?
well, 300 trees total, about 45% of them recommended for removal. So, call it 135, 140 trees. So, we're clearly making a dent in it. Not all 60 trees. The inventory just covered the major roads. And not all of the 50, 60 trees on the list right now are on those major roads. So, but making some good progress. Obviously, the follow-up inevitably is what's happening with plantings. So there was a fair amount of discussion about that last night, and hopefully we have a plan on where they're going to go and what they're going to be and what the
That's
timing of that's going to
20
be.
trees?
20 trees, 10 this fall and 10 this spring is what the DPW has committed to planting.
Very good. Okay. Any other comments, guys? On the Okay. Then I vote that we approve the minutes from the June 18th, 2018 FinCom meeting as presented, and to include some edits.
Minor edits.
Minor edits, which won't, change the substance of the notes.
I second the motion.
Thank you. All in favor?
All right.
Thank you. All right, so we're getting ready to kick off budget season, and I guess that brings us to our budget forecast meeting in mid-September.
That's the
List
goal.
tentative plan.
Want to check on everybody's availability that night.
Okay.
That is an off-cycle Tuesday, non-selectmen's meeting. September's a little tricky because the primary is on the Tuesday right after Labor Day. That would be our normal selectmen's meeting. So
the fourth?
yeah, that's the 4th. So selectmen are meeting on the 11th and the 25th in September. So the 18th is, an off week for the board, and obviously the past couple of years we've started our budget building process about 6 weeks earlier than this.
Yeah.
I think going through the process last year, we tried to get out ahead of it and communicate our issues, and that didn't really make that much of a difference to the way the process played out. So the thought was that we would kind of push the process back to our standard cycle, and I think we'll still be in a good position for that November summit meeting with Hamilton and the schools.
Right.
To give them a sense of where we stand. But we probably won't be as far along in kind of finalizing our numbers as we have been at least last year and certainly the year before that.
Right. Of course, we'll have a new finance director by then, but perhaps.
That was part of the
About
other
September.
reason
Yeah.
behind pushing it back, quite honestly, is we were hoping to have the finance director involved in the process as much as possible.
Yeah. That's a good move.
And do you want me to segue, not necessarily on the agenda, but just give a little bit of an update on that front?
That'd be great,
Okay.
please.
Leslie's last day was August 3rd. Monica Ford, who's the Winthrop treasure collector, has been for a long time, has been filling in on a very part-time basis, basically just keeping that function going along. She worked with Leslie in July, and then has been in here once or twice a week over the past several weeks. We posted the finance director / treasurer collector position in June originally. Didn't get tremendous response the first time through, so we reposted the job. Second time through, we had several qualified candidates put in. Alex and Chris Holak, the town accountant, and I interviewed 3 candidates, and coming out of that process, ultimately, the Board of Selectmen last night interviewed the finalist for the position.
A
Finalist for the position, and extended a conditional offer of employment to her, subject to contract negotiations, background check, and an acceptable transition plan for the finance office. The candidate, Patty Moore, very strong background in finance. She was actually, she lived in Linfield a long time. She was on the Linfield Fin-Com for 10 years, 5 of them as chair. Previous to that, she'd been in private sector finance. But she was there through the whole Market Street project, which is, as you might imagine, was pretty complicated and controversial. And then started working in municipal finance. She was first in Lexington as the budget director. She actually, because it's a small world, had my job in Newburyport as the CAO for a little bit of time, and is now up in Kittery as Kittery, Maine, as the finance director up there. And so very strong on, I think, the finance director side of things and the budget side of things. So I think she'll be a great resource, and has had a good amount of experience working with and managing on the treasure collector side, but not directly and not en masse. So that's really what the transition plan is about, is making sure that she has the support that she needs, that the finance office has the staffing it needs to make it a smooth transition. So worked on that a fair amount today, and we'll continue that over the next couple weeks, and expect to have that plan for the board at their September 11th meeting, along with the other couple components. So the goal is hopefully to complete that process successfully and have her in place, if not in October, certainly by the beginning part of November, just because she has to give notice to her other employer as well.
That's great.
I like the fact that she served on the FinCom for 10 years.
Yes.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
because she can see things from two sides of the,
Yep.
Yeah,
Right.
of the discussions
Yep.
and the issues, as
Absolutely.
a citizen, as a professional. It's a nice mix.
yeah, it is. And I think she's going to be a really good fit. Just her demeanor, her approach, her personality, I think is going to be a good fit here with everybody. So that's promising. Hopeful to obviously have that position filled as soon as we can.
No doubt, yep. Hope to have good news soon on that front. All right, so we'll all, of course, check with David, and we'll find out our availability and hopefully lock in the next meeting on the 18th.
That'd be great. Yeah, just let me know if that is an issue, just because a lot of moving parts.
Yeah,
So
I'm
trying to get
avail-
everybody
I'm
around the table.
available on
Are you? Great.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
believe I am as well.
Yeah.
I see no showstoppers and, okay, so far so good.
I can be
Okay.
made available.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
Come back from there.
Very well. Any other?
One other thing,
Yeah, sure.
just thought would make sense to share out. Tom Tanis, Chairman of the Board of Assessors, popped in during public comment last night, Board of Selectmen's meeting, and shared out some very good news on the new growth front for FY18. So you'll remember that the Measure and List project, much talked about, finally approved $10,000 in FY17, and the balance of $22,000 in 18. Bob Brindle's been doing that work, going around parcel by parcel over the past year and a half plus, and completed all his field work. It was all entered. 99.9% of it was entered into the system for the close of last fiscal year. And so projected new growth, and it has to be verified by DOR. So, that could change up or down certainly a little bit, but looks to be on the order of just under $500,000.
Excellent.
So historic,
At 300,000
No.
or something at one point?
Was it like 150,
Is-
100?
Or was it even much
Yeah.
lower?
our new growth projection is $100,000.
Yeah.
Last year,
The evergreen projection,
correct,
but
but
higher last year?
no, we actually ended up at
Wow.
100. So just to give you a sense, the prior year, our actual new growth was 208. And much of that was due to the results of the initial inputting of Measure and List data from the first year.
Right.
So net, and again, this is ballpark, but should be relatively accurate. Net total new growth that we've gained from the Measure and List project is about $350,000. $350,000. So we
Got
spent
it.
32 and
Yep.
gained $350,000 of
Yeah.
capacity.
Right.
So that's there forever. And it's also a matter of equity, right? Everybody's paying their fair share. And it also helps, we're going into a reval this year with DOR. That's every 5 years now. It used to be every 3. But that's something that you're required to go through statutorily with Department of Revenue. And it basically is a process where the state's making sure that your data is accurate. And we've got the most updated, detailed data that we possibly ever could, because it's all been done and all been done recently and at pretty much the same time.
It's essentially an audit
Yeah,
of what we've done. They don't have a role in reassigning or doing any of the work that's been done. They don't,
So they may make adjustments to evaluations, but it's an audit, but then it is also somewhat prescriptive.
Oh.
Can you, I'm trying to remember how this was sliced and diced. Is it the same, is it considered new growth both for improvements to homes as well as building a new home?
So,
Isn't-
new growth is both,
Okay.
yes.
That
But
answers it.
the $350,000 amount is just from capturing some construction that was unknown and improvements that were unknown.
As in new construction or just construction on existing
Or
homes?
renovations.
Hopefully not new construction.
Not new construction.
that's why
Where did this
I'm
house come from?
Amazed. That's what I'm asking, that seems crazy.
Renovations.
It's mainly renovations. Yep, and you know, inaccuracies that may have been long-standing that hadn't necessarily been addressed over the years. They just kind of
Yeah.
sat on the books. And so it's great because it's accurate data, and we have, for a process which ultimately resulted in an increase in valuation of millions of dollars. I personally, and generally speaking, didn't hear a single complaint about this person's interactions with the residents, which is pretty impressive, to go around every house in town and you know, come out with an end result that generally means your valuation is going to be increasing. So I think that certainly speaks to the professionalism of the individual who is doing the work.
Not just the professionalism, he has a wonderful demeanor about him. How he, because he's coming onto private property
Yeah.
to assess this, and he does it in just a wonderful manner. I think I've said it before, I was very taken.
I think you did, you were home when he came
Yeah,
in.
we ended up having this wonderful conversation
Right.
about, I can't remember what it was now, but it was just very good, very professional,
He's gotta have some good people skills.
wonderful.
Yeah.
So certainly good news, you know, on the
Yeah, that's
tax rate, on the levy, you know, creating some additional capacity for going into next budget cycle.
Right.
Certainly a lot more than we projected. And I think on new growth in particular, you know, we're conservative, because ultimately, hard to say where something like that is gonna end up. And there's a fair amount of fluctuation, year to year. That being said, about, you know, we generally, we used to see between $200,000 and $300,000 in new growth back, going back 6-8 years ago. It really kind of leveled off and was more on the order of $125,000 for about the past 5 years. But this year, pulling out the measure and list increase, we still had new growth about $225,000. So that is, you know, we're getting to be in you know, a little better place there.
Right.
And going forward, we can expect that to really start to step up, because we now have, you know, the Wenham Pines and Spring Hill subdivisions, both.
I was just gonna ask, is Spring Hill the one that's on Dodges Row?
Correct.
I can't remember the name of it. Yeah, I was gonna ask, when do those come online?
So there's a incremental value increase that we saw for last year, for both of those, because they really both were just starting out. It's really starting this fiscal year and then going forward, that we
So
can
it's not
expect.
once they're sold? It's,
No, we capture the value on, as they go along. There's value in whatever is there.
okay.
So, yeah, and, you know, back when we had the discussion about Wenham Pines, assuming everything gets built and sold and completed in terms of that project, we had projected it at the time, and that was then dollars, so you could probably extrapolate up about $500,000 just from that project in new growth and levy capacity. So there is some relief on the horizon, certainly on the revenue side.
Right. They're breaking ground. building that road? They got
Yep.
all their permits and everything?
Yep, and they have, yeah, all the local permits, they're cranking on both. Spring Hill's already looking for the release of 12 of the 17 lots in September, so
Where
they're,
is Spring Hill? We
Yeah.
talked before, it's off Dodges
No,
Road.
so if you go, like across Larch and then you cross over to Dodge's Row, it's maybe an eighth to a quarter mile on the left.
you can't miss it if you go down Dodges.
It's right before Grover Street. It's on the west property.
Yeah, it's the old west property.
Gotta go down and see.
It's,
Are they condominiums? What are they?
no,
Oh, single
They look like
homes.
nice homes.
single family, custom built, very high end.
100,000 square feet, it looks like.
Who's doing them? Who's building?
I mean, a couple thousand square feet.
Is it,
They look,
I should know this, I think it's Barry.
CP
No,
Barry
that's
or
not
is it-
right.
no.
No, that's not right.
He's in Beverly.
Yeah,
Contractor.
it-
It's right there, Beverly and Golf Course.
Okay.
North Shore guy, very, I mean,
High-end stuff.
yeah, well respected. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would imagine with the, so how's the new permitting and inspection going in light of, I mean, clearly there's a lot of work being done, right? I mean, market's up,
Sure.
savings are up, everyone's locked into their homes, because rates are creeping up, no one can trade up anymore. Can't trade up in these towns.
So,
Who's that on?
yeah, so,
Unless you're doing something right.
also last night at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, they did some interviews and made appointments for our new full-time building inspector, our electrical inspector, our plumbing and gas inspector. So we're in the process of finalizing all of those detailed terms of employment and such right now as we speak. And we'll be rolling that out in September.
Okay.
McNiff, Michael McNiff.
Yes.
Is it safe to assume, but possibly by 2020, that between Spring Hill and Wenham Pines, we're looking at $1 million?
I don't know, the Wenham Pines phasing was never made explicit.
Oh.
So it's a little harder to say with that. I think Spring Hill seems to be moving very quickly. And my understanding is,
So those sound to be all 7-figure homes.
yes.
And any deed restrictions, like the age restriction, or no?
No age
No,
restriction there, but there's at least 2 affordable units.
Okay,
in Wenham Pines or Spring Hill?
Both.
both, yeah.
2 in Wenham Pines and at least 2.
Doesn't change our ratio, though.
What's that?
It doesn't really change the arithmetic of reaching the 10%. Those 4 units aren't gonna.
Absolutely. We are 18 units away from 10%. Every unit counts.
Yeah, but we're adding 23 down here, and we're adding 18 over
Yeah, but
there.
percentage is
yeah, but it's actually,
Oh, so it does help.
it does help.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
yes,
Gets us close, we're within striking distance.
yes.
Wow, 18 units?
Yeah, that's the number
And we
as
need to
of
reach
today.
the
I mean,
10.
that number will definitely change with the 2020 census. The question is by how much.
Good, some revenue relief maybe. on the horizon.
So we'll just see what the enrollment shift is come October.
Expense relief is always welcome too.
Yeah, you said revenue relief, and I was like, but the expenses.
No, I know, expense relief
What
is
just
what
went
we
through
really
my
need.
head?
All right.
Not on
good
Wenham
discussion.
Pines. That's a known entity.
Mhm.
All right, great. Any other thoughts or questions while we're all here?
No?
Okay, all right, well, I will move to adjourn then.
Second?
All in favor?
Wow.
Thank you.
Very good.